So I was watching a video where Rabbi Tovia Singer was speaking, and he mentioned how in Isaiah chapter 46, that's the chapter preceding, of course, Isaiah chapter 45, where Isaiah calls Cyrus the Great of Persia Messiah, mentioning him by name, whereas in the case of the Christian Messiah, Isaiah just isn't able to come up with his name. But anyway, that's a side point. Anyway, in Isaiah chapter 46, it begins by um, blasting Bel or Baal, and um, uh, apparently it says in, um, let's see, where is it? In the Strong's definitions for uh, Hebrew Strong's number 1078, it says Baal by contraction for Hebrew Strong's number 1168, Bel, the Baal of the Babylonians. So apparently it's just like a difference in pronunciation or a cultural appropriation of Baal that was had amongst the Babylonians. So uh, what Yeshayahu, the prophet, says, um, let me go to the Revised Standard Version for some clarity. Bel bows down, Nebo stoops. Their idols are on beasts and cattle. These things you carry are loaded as burdens on weary beasts. So I think in essence he's trying to say your gods are so powerless that they have to be carried about on beasts of burden. They stoop, they bow down together, they cannot save the burden, but they themselves go into captivity. Um, and Rabbi Tovia Singer, he said that these were some insane criticisms or mockeries of Baal. I don't think he meant insane in the sense that they didn't make sense. He just thought that it was language uh, kind of uncharacteristic of how an Israelite, especially a prophet, might speak, except that uh, mocking false gods is considered okay um, in Torah because it's you're mocking unreality, you're mocking um, insults to the creator. Not that the creator really needs you to do that for him, because it's really just Yeshayahu pointing out the obvious. It's like anybody with eyes should be able to see this. It's just a really base, ignorant individual who worships an image that has no power to do anything for itself, much less for anyone else. But I guess there's an allowance made by some opinions for non-Jews, non-Israelites, Gentiles, Goyim, um, that they might worship the Creator through a shituf, like an intermediary. Um, I don't know if it's an allowance made for their ignorance or what, but I think that there's maybe like a halachic basis for that. But then I guess other opinions say that, for example, Christianity is idolatry, while again the other opinion is that Gentiles are allowed to worship the Creator through a shituf, an intermediary. But it's like, why would you want to? Why would you need to? It's like the old expression, eliminate the middleman. If you can access and commune with the Creator directly, why would you introduce an intermediary? and and it's funny that like Christians, they make such allowances for Jesus as an intermediary between them and the Creator, while at the same time Jesus is also supposedly God the Son. It's the Trinity is just a logical orgy. Don't even try to make sense of it. But then they get so insulted by the fact that there's this hierarchy, if you will, of priestal order, really an order of a sense of holiness in Judaism that existed long before Christianity came along. So why are you're the Johnny come lately, why are you getting insulted about what existed before you? Anyway, so yeah, he pointed that out, um, and then I recalled, of course, where the prophet Eliyahu, um, he's speaking to the prophets of Baal. I thought there were priests, but anyway, here it says they're prophets of Baal. Like, how can you be a prophet for a god that is no god? Um, Maybe it's like they're just presumptive spokesmen for a God that doesn't exist. Kind of the way that Christian missionaries are the advertisers and defenders of someone they say who is the Messiah. And the question is, well, if he's the Messiah, why does he need you to defend him? Like, why isn't it apparent to the whole world, obviously, that he is the Messiah? Instead, he needs this little army of self-appointed um, deputies to go out and defend him. So, anyway, in this passage, the prophet Eliyahu, he's challenging Baal as a deity, and he puts up this little contest, kind of a wager, and to prove which deity is the true one. And in verse 27 of 1 Kings chapter 18, it says, "And at noon Eliyahu mocked them, saying, 'Cry aloud, for he is a god.'" In other words, cry out, for he's a deity. Surely he'll hear you, because in the previous verse they're saying, "Oh Baal, answer us," but there was no voice and no one answered. So then the prophet Eliyahu mocks them. He says, cry aloud. He's probably telling them, hey, shout louder. Then he says either he is musing, or he's gone aside, or he is on a journey, or perhaps he is asleep and must be awakened. Now this part where it says he has gone aside, it's rendered in so many different ways by different translators. But some translations render that as maybe he's using the privy, or he's relieving himself, or basically he's somewhere taking a dump, or you get the picture. He's doing his business. So because there's such a variation in the translation there, I asked the AI about it, and and it says Google AI says some translations of 1 Kings 18:27 suggest that Elijah was mocking the prophets of Baal by implying that Baal might be using the restroom. This interpretation stems from the Hebrew words used sia, looks like sia, and sig, which can refer to excretion or defecation, according to Jewish studies at Rutgers. The verse describes Elijah mocking the prophets, suggesting that Baal might be busy with something other than responding to their calls, and some translators interpret this busyness as being related to bodily functions. Here's a more detailed explanation. Hebrew wording: the Hebrew phrases sia and sig in 1 Kings 18:27 are interpreted by some scholars as euphemisms for bodily functions. Context of mockery: Elijah is mocking the prophets of Baal, who are fervently calling upon their God to send fire to consume a sacrifice. Implied meaning by suggesting Baal might be on a journey, or perhaps he is asleep and must be awakened. Elijah is not suggesting these are literal possibilities, but rather he's taunting them by implying that their God is unresponsive or inactive, possibly even engaged in mundane human-like activities. Doing his business. The phrase doing his business is used in some modern translations as a way to capture the essence of Elijah's taunt, which is meant to be derogatory and to highlight the perceived weakness of Baal, according to Blogger.com. Uh, Biblical precedent. This type of mocking language is not unheard of in the Bible, as other instances of derogatory language used in reference to false gods or those deserving of contempt exist. So, and here we see sig, as it says, sig, Hebrew Strong's number 7873. It says, here it's translated pursuing once, but here it says a moving away, but then it also says dross, which I think dross is like sewage. Let me see. Something regarded as worthless or rubbish is dross. So, um, so that's why some people say maybe he's on a trip. Maybe he's gone away or something. It's translated, like I said, variously. Now, um, in this is at Catholic Bible's blog spot, um, and the title of the article is 1 Kings 18:27, doing his business. And I didn't really take time to bother reading this whole thing. Some of it is repeating what we've already gone over. But then in this comment is it Carl Hearns says, this is where my Jewish heritage comes in handy. The Nabre, the Nabre, is very correct in its rendering. What is that? Is that a Catholic translation of the Bible? I read it in the Nabre. Um, it doesn't. I'm not sure what the. I used to have a New Jerusalem Bible, and I really liked that Bible because the Catholic scholars can be really eloquent with their translation and their English, um, often attempting to preserve the poetry where it exists in the original language, or trying to use words that, anyway. Sometimes they'll rearrange the order of verses though to make the flow seem better or something. I don't know. It's and and I think for like many Bible students that would be disturbing to have a translator rearrange the order of verses. But really, some of these Catholic scholars, their education seems very or superior to that of most Protestant scholars, and a lot of times in their footnotes they're revealing things that academics know about, and it helps you learn a lot of truth. It's been a long time since I've studied a Catholic Bible with its commentary, but it led me to different truths that I wasn't getting from Protestant publications. And it made me wonder, how can the Catholic scholars know all of this and yet they're so steeped in their, um, what I thought was a deficient form of Christianity? Of course, now I know that Roman Catholicism is much closer to the original Christianity than um, Protestant Christianity, and for so many different reasons. Even though with all of its trappings, it may not seem to resemble what we picture early Christianity resembling. When you realize that Christianity was invented by the Roman Flavian dynasty, you see that a lot of these trappings in Roman Catholicism come from the Roman Empire. So anyway, so what does he say? He says it's very correct in its rendering. It is a euphemism meant to imply that Baal was not divine, but like humans who must relieve themselves. Similar euphemisms like this occur when the description is used that is meant to be derogatory. For example, though the Nabre just has single male in this instance at 1 Samuel 25:22, the expression is actually anyone who urinates against a wall. Yeah, like I think in the King James Version, those who pisseth against a wall, for the men David wants to see dead. So what's up with all this waste talk in the Bible? In Hebrew culture and language, the word used for false gods in idol form is gulium, and literally means logs of excrement. Anything of contempt is generally spoken of in this way in biblical Hebrew culture. The men David felt deserved nothing better than death were thus spoken of in a manner referencing how they eliminated, and so is Baal by Elijah in the instance you mentioned. Elijah's words are a taunt, much like the English taunt is sung nya 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 nya, or your God can't hear you because he has to poop. This was a way to say Baal was mundane and to play off the words used to describe false gods. And then I think, yeah, so anyway, you can read more of that. And then I found this, actually, I think Google kind of recommended these last two links. And this is a website, a game for good Christians. I don't know what this website's about, so I can't, I don't know what their perspective is. What I did see in the article, uh, anyway, in this banner it says, lol, laugh out loud, your God ain't shit. Your God being unable to hear you because he's off taking a shit in the bushes, 1 Kings 18:27, on the Bible's motif of shit-talking Baal. And, and so, forgive my language. Personally, I don't think that there's any prohibition against using the word shit. Uh, you could say some words that have more syllables to describe the same thing as literally. I know that there's a teaching in Torah observant Judaism about your speech, bringing up various negative things when you don't have to, uh, like that's generally frowned upon, and you really want your language to be uh, lofty and representative of kind of like a personal royalty or something, nobility. But personally, I don't like things that obscure the original meaning and intent. And here, this thing goes into all about um, all this scatological talk about false gods. And anyway, so it really dwells on how uh, this this rendering of maybe your god is off taking a dump kind of thing, on how backed up it is, not just in other biblical references, but also by passages in the Talmud, whether that's the Babylonian Talmud or the Jerusalem Talmud. Um, and let's see. Anyway, I just thought that this was a refreshingly practical and article from what I saw of it. I don't I won't say I've read it all the way through, but the comments I did see. Um, so it says the verse saying it's a disrespectful euphemism, meaning that Baal has to relieve himself. Maybe he is busy, maybe doing his business. Um, call with a louder voice, perhaps. That's strange. The way they perhaps there they translated it Elohim, um, rather than saying perhaps your God is distracted or defecating or detoured. Perhaps he is asleep and will awaken. So, anyway, you can read this one too. You should be able to Google any of this and find it. And so now, by comparison, if the prophet Eliyahu is pointing out how their God is false because he must be off doing any one of these human things, right? Then we should compare that to the Christian God the Son. Hebrews chapter 4 verse 14, since then we have a great high priest, and that's kind of redundant to say great high priest, unless they're saying he's greater than the high priest, because already Kohen Hagadol or Kohen Gadol already is translated either high or great. So it's like you're saying we have a high priest, but of course that's not what is being said in Greek, because we have a mega high priest is what it says in Greek. Actually, it says arch Hierus. Let's see. Archiereus from, this is arch, it's going to be like a leader or something. Beginning principality corner first. Uh, the first person or thing in a series, the leader, and then Yerus. we shouldn't spend too much time getting hung up on this, but anyway, and then priest. So it's a leader priest, which is the high priest in the Jewish system, right? The Kohen Gadol. So, but here the Greek is saying a mega high priest. And then it says, who has passed through the heavens, Jesus, the son of, I'm not even going to say it, let us hold fast our confession. Maybe it's the next verse. For we have not a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who is in every respect has been tempted as we are, yet without sin. So this is emphasizing the Christian confession about Jesus. Believed to be fully God and fully man simultaneously. See, I had to inform my mother, who is a Christian, that according to Christian doctrine, Jesus is not half man and half God. That's actually I think that's like a pagan way of looking at it. But as Google AI says, yes, within mainstream Christian theology, Jesus is believed to be fully God and fully human simultaneously. This doctrine, known as the hypostatic union, posits that Jesus is one person with two distinct natures, divine and human. He is not half God and half man, but rather fully both, coexisting in one unified being. So, then taking a look at Numbers chapter 23, verse 19, God is not a man, and this is spoken by Balaam, one of the, I think it said, one of the most powerful prophets. It's just that he was, I guess, bent against the children of Israel. But he says, he took up a discourse, and he said, God is not a man that he should lie, or a son of man that he should repent. There, that verse clearly says that the Creator, the deity of the Bible, is neither a man, so he's not fully man, that he should lie, or a son of man, which is the title that is typically assigned to the Messiah and to Jesus by Christians, that he should repent, or in other words, retract his words, I think in this case. Has he said, and will he not do it? Or has he spoken, and will he not fulfill it? So here are some condemning criticisms of the Christian God the Son, so-called, right? Is that on the one hand, he's fully man, so he urinated, he defecated, he vomited, he had seminal emissions, maybe when he was younger. Because the Torah, it's got laws surrounding seminal emissions. That's called the white. Whereas with women and their monthly menstrual cycle, that's called the red. And he, especially back then, with the food they had back then, and fermentation, and, the gut flora that people had back then, I'm sure was much more active than it is for us nowadays. He more than likely also had explosive diarrhea at some point in his life. So Christians worship a God who defecated and who had explosive diarrhea. Why do we need such a God? When the deity of the Bible was not a man that he would piss or lie or defecate or vomit or have explosive diarrhea. Why would we need a God who's so much like the corruption we already experience in our own lives? So, if it was valid to criticize Baal for the prophet Eliyahu to do so in those words, the prophet Eliyahu is basically also criticizing the Christian God, who is supposed to be fully man. Also, the Christian God has said and has not done, and he has spoken and he has not fulfilled it. Now, here, about a generation after the year 2000, Christians might still say that it's their duty as Christians to await the second coming of Jesus, in fulfillment of prophecy, from the Gospels and what have you. Even though if you read the Christian scriptures in a good modern translation, you'll see that the disciples and the Christian minds back then who wrote these things, they were expecting him to come back in their lifetimes. Now, the thing is, if in the year 2000 the second coming hasn't happened, and yet because no man knoweth the day or the hour, Christians should go on waiting for him, then let me ask you, okay, what about 5 million years from now? Are Christians still duty bound to wait for his return 5 million years from now? Or do we admit that this is a prophecy that cannot be tested according to the test of a true prophet? And therefore, it's not a prophecy that we should fear. Because if you're still duty bound to wait for him 5 million years from now, you are still duty bound to wait for him into infinity. And that is not a second coming. That is more like 1 Kings chapter 18. Maybe he's musing, or he's gone aside, or he's on a journey, or perhaps he's asleep and must be awakened. Because your God hasn't come back the way he was expected to. So maybe it's time to ask yourself, why do I need this shituf, this intermediary between me and God, when I can just worship God directly?